Rose Blanchard's grandpa, Gypsy Rose Blanchard's grandpa supposedly did stuff to her and her mom. Let's go ahead and learn about this. And we're going to go ahead through a lot of the abuse that Gypsy Rose Blanchard actually went through because it's pretty bad. It is pretty bad when your mom has Munchausen syndrome and treats you like you're infected with every disease imaginable so that they can scam the world. Scam the world into giving them houses. Scam the world into giving them a livelihood, basically. Okay, so anyway, but we're going to start with Gypsy Rose Blanchard's accused a relative of S abuse, and that was her own grandfather. Claims she was that as a child by her grandfather. As a child. Let's get into it. And he, of course, denies the allegations in a particularly shocking way. This is very interesting. Because although he says it didn't happen, listen to what he says about it. Very kind of like disgusting. The claim is made in Lifetime's The Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, which premieres January 5th. Comes out tomorrow? I'm going to watch that 100%. Gypsy, a victim of Munchausen by proxy, was released from prison last Thursday, having served 8 years for the 2015 unaliving of her abusive mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. And we're going to get into that abuse. We are. Gypsy reiterated her claim that she was abused by her grandfather, Claude Petre? Something like that. In an exclusive interview with People, and that the S abuse went on for about a year. For about a year! Now keep that in mind. A baby, about a year. Or what do you say? As a child, for about a year. So just remember that. Remember that. I've gotten to a point where I can stand on my own 2 feet and say this happened to me and I'm not going to let it affect me anymore. Tells People about the alleged abuse. This is Gypsy Rose talking. And that's why I'm talking about it now. And I think for me, making it known that it happened might prevent him from doing the same thing to another family member or another child or another person because he's still alive. Think about that. In the documentary, Petre was directly asked about the allegations, which he denied, while also making a shocking claim of his own. Here's the shocking part, guys. This is shocking. She was the one that was trying to touch me. That doesn't make it okay. Okay? That doesn't make it okay. And I'd say no. Don't do that. She started doing that when, and here's the shocker, on top of this other shocking stuff, this right here, she started doing that when she was about 4 years old. And Gypsy said this continued for a whole year. For about a year. 4 years old! When told about her grandfather's claim, Gypsy tells the interviewer and producer that she wants nothing to do with him. I don't want anything to do with anybody. Or at least I wouldn't if they ever did this kind of stuff to me. That's terrible. In her interview with People, Gypsy says she was hesitant to tell her mother about the abuse and that she was 19 when she finally told Dee Dee 10 years after she said it happened. 10 years. So she claims it was 9. He said she was 4. 9 and 4. So if it continued for a year, it went from 9 until she was 10 years old, or from the grandpa 4 until she was 5. So who's telling the truth? I fully told her everything that happened, and she proceeded to let me know he had done the same thing to her when she was a child as well, Gypsy says. The same thing. And remember, especially with like forms of abuse, if you abuse one, it starts a circle of abuse. It was hard for us to both come to grips with the fact that we had both been abused by the same person. And I think it makes me wonder what other kinds of forms of abuse did she suffer that I don't know about? Facts. Petre did not respond to a request for comment from Pillow. I don't think he will because he got caught. People, Gypsy Rose Blanchard released from prison, her shocking journey. A victim of extreme Munchausen syndrome by proxy, she was convicted of orchestrating the 2015 unaliving of her mom. Now she reveals new details about the horrors she survived and her regrets and hopes to start over with her husband. By the way, she claims that when she was in prison, she had more freedom than she ever had with her mother. So she grew up in a prison, physically, mentally, and then when she went to prison, physically and mentally, she was more free than when she was with her mother. And this just tells you about... Okay, now let's go ahead and get into the abuse that she went through, okay? All about Gypsy Rose's case that inspired... Trying to find it. I'm sorry, guys. Maybe there's a... Hold on. Let's go to YouTube real quick. Because I believe there was like a whole YouTube done on it. Arhunka... Gypsy Rose Blanchard abuse. Wow. We could... Yeah, let's watch this. There we go.
On Prime Crime.
Prime Crime.
Dark truth.
The dark truth.
Adored family.
This woman suffered this abuse, all the medications, feeding tubes.
A shocking crime that changed everything.
That's another thing. She had feeding tubes put into her body. Feeding tubes put into her body. I mean, goodness gracious.
Her lungs would have literally been floating in blood.
And the twisted mind of a killer.
Yep.
He wanted you to help clean up blood, right?
Yes, sir.
And he wanted you to clean naked.
Yes, sir.
Let's get it.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome to Prime Crime.
Oh!
Do a deeper dive into the...
This guy was, he was doing the Ruby Frankie thing that we did earlier. Look, this must have been a while ago, because look how much younger he looks. Good job, Jesse.
most high-profile and memorable true crime cases. Our next story is about a mother and daughter, but it's a relationship straight out of a horror movie.
This is Claudine Dee Blanchard and Gypsy Blanchard. At first glance, they look like a loving mother and daughter. Those who knew them would say Dee Dee relentlessly took care of her young girl, who ever since the age of 8 was suffering from numerous ailments like leukemia and muscular dystrophy. The only problem? It was all a lie.
This woman, Dee Dee Blanchard, held the ultimate control over Gypsy.
Yep.
Gypsy was in fact a healthy girl. Evidence would reveal that Dee Dee deliberately fabricated her daughter's medical conditions. She forced Gypsy to be confined to a wheelchair, shaved her head, and sometimes had her take medications that would mimic symptoms of real diseases.
Did you hear that? She would have her take medication that would make her look like she was sick. She was poisoning her child so that they could keep this con going. Shaving her, I mean, goodness gracious. She treated her daughter like a cash cow instead of like a human being.
All of the years that Gypsy had suffered through with surgeries that were unnecessary, procedures, this perceived facade.
By the way, where was her dad this entire time? I have not heard anything about her father. I know all about the 500-year-old vampire Victor that was the boy that she reached out to. And by the way, her first S experience, where she lost her virginity, was in a bathroom at a movie theater. At a bathroom. And then after the 500-year-old vampire Victor inside the go to judge. They then got together, like directly after he did that to the mom.
Odd that she had to carry on with.
While it's not clear what led Dee Dee to do this, her own mother was apparently overbearing as well. Family members have indicated a strained relationship between the two, with some suggesting, at the end, Dee Dee may have starved her mother to death. Whatever may be the case, health professionals believe Dee Dee may have been showing signs of a mental illness called Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
A caregiver is intentionally feigning or actually committing some kind of medical or psychological problem on the person that they are supposed to be caring for. They do this because they appreciate the attention that they get from having some.
By the way, I had no idea that Dee Dee Blanchard could have possibly starved her own mom to unalivement. I had no idea that was even a thing. I know it now, but wow.
Someone in their life that needs significant medical or psychological help.
Dee Dee was able to con the public by receiving donations, having the Make-A-Wish Foundation pay for a trip to Disney World, and even allowing Habitat for Humanity to build the two a house in Springfield, Missouri. Despite signs that this was a farce, Dee Dee continually misled doctors and caseworkers.
This is a failure of the healthcare system. How can a person who is not ill see so many neurologists, oncologists, and other doctors and not be treated?
For the majority of her life, Gypsy didn't know the truth. In fact, her mother convinced her she was younger than she was, going so far as to change the dates on her daughter's birth certificate. But by 19, Gypsy was beginning to peel back the layers and started to act out.
She tried to rebel. She still tried to engage in teenager kinds of behaviors because she wanted to feel safe and feel free and feel normal.
In 2012, the story takes a turn. Gypsy meets a young man from Big Bend, Wisconsin named Nicholas Godejohn on a dating website called...
Okay, so she meets him in 2012. The unalivement happened in 2015, so 3 years later.
ChristianDatingForFree.com and forms a relationship with him. Although they became girlfriend and boyfriend pretty quickly, it would be years before they actually met in person. In 2015, they consummated their love by having sex in a movie theater bathroom behind Dee Dee's back. Dee Dee.
That was the first time they'd ever met. And it was the first time that she'd ever had that kind of experience.
Wasn't happy with the relationship.
It didn't go well at all. My mother hated him from the moment they met.
3 months later, Dee Dee Blanchard would be dead. On June 14th, 2015, law enforcement entered the Blanchard home and find her massacred corpse, a later autopsy revealing she had been stabbed 17 times.
Yep.
What makes this all the more horrific is not just the injury of the knife being plunged through her back, but also penetrating the lungs, and she is essentially suffocating to death on her own blood.
Yep.
Initially, Gypsy is nowhere to be found. But then, a clue. Someone using Dee Dee's Facebook account posts graphic and disturbing messages. Investigators track the IP address to Nicholas Godejohn. Once Wisconsin authorities burst into his home, they find Gypsy alive and well. In a surprising twist, Nicholas decides to tell police what happened.
Okay, I'll admit it. I did actually stab her.
Do you know how many times you stabbed her?
He says 4, yep. But it was 17 times. And one person said it was almost like the head was just barely hanging there. Like it could have just... He was trying to take the head off. 17 times.
But did Nicholas act alone? Coming up, the story takes a turn again.
Did Gypsy know that you were going to kill her mother? stabbed her 4?
Yeah, 4 times. The fourth one, I felt it go into, I think it might have been her lungs.
It's June 2015, and a young man named Nicholas Godejohn is telling a Missouri detective that he murdered Dee Dee Blanchard, the mother of his girlfriend Gypsy. Dee Dee had abused Gypsy for years, namely convincing her daughter she was sick and confining her to a wheelchair-bound, infirm life. Did Nicholas then decide to take matters into his own hands and kill Dee Dee? As we're all about to find out, not exactly.
Did Gypsy know that you were going to kill her mother?
Honestly, she asked me to.
Okay. Why did she ask you to do that?
Because she thought it was her only way to be with me.
Investigator.
And that's another thing too. Like I brought this up before, but when you're getting abused, there's a lot of people that when they're getting abused and then they grow up, they then go and turn on those abusers. I don't feel bad that Dee Dee's gone. I don't. I don't feel bad that she got on a life like this. I don't. I feel bad for Gypsy. I feel bad for this guy who was convinced to do it. Because Gypsy's out and he won't get out.
Piece together a fuller picture of the murder. Gypsy wanted her mother dead.
She wants to break free and understands that the only way that she can break free is by her mother no longer being in the picture. So because he sees this person that he loves being abused and being hurt, he's willing to then engage in any kind of behavior that would succeed in that goal of the two of them being together.
Nicholas explains that Gypsy led him into the house, gave him the knife, and stood back as he proceeded to stab Dee Dee to death in the middle of the night.
Can you tell me how she said it?
She pretty much yelped it.
Yelped it?
It's like,
Gypsy. Okay.
Yeah, she was loud.
And what did you do when she did that?
It didn't stop me from keep on going.
Okay. You just kept stabbing her?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's something else to know about Nicholas. He was diagnosed with autism.
One of the hallmarks is this inability to have reciprocal social interactions, meaning everything seems to be kind of just one-sided for him.
You seemed like a very reasonable, genuinely nice young man during my interactions with him. Now his interactions were a little bit odd and stiff initially, particularly, which is very common with the autism spectrum. And Nicholas was very mild in that spectrum.
He also has an extremely low IQ.
He doesn't understand complicated and complex concepts. So just immediately being asked whether or not he did it, yeah, he would immediately confess to the crime. He has no reason not to.
I think Nicholas's confession was done intelligently and voluntarily. There is no evidence of any coercion. Just because he has a certain level of diminished capacity doesn't mean that he is not capable of providing a confession that will stand up in a court of law.
And that's what they argued. That's what they argued.
Was he manipulating Gypsy?
Does she have the ability?
No, Gypsy was definitely manipulating him.
Conceptualize in that moment what she has entered into. It's almost like she's entered into a deal with another devil.
Or was she manipulating him?
It's easy to see how someone could influence him into engaging in some kind of problematic behavior.
I really think she did somewhat set him up in that regard, to where he believed the only way they could have this happy future together was if Dee Dee was no longer in the picture. And Gypsy had indicated to him that she had run away before, but her mother always found her, and I believe she convinced Nicholas that if they did run away together, her mother would always find them.
Yeah.
And it would always end.
Nicholas has only provided part of the story. Up next, we hear from Gypsy 2.
Yeah, so I'm just going to cut this off. She goes through all this. We're talking about the torture she went through. I've already covered the actual trial in a previous video. But she goes through all this torture. And she's been tortured by her grandfather as well. And then she gets this guy to unalive her mom. Well, guess what? She's out. And yeah, I'm 100% behind her. I hope she has an amazing life. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for being you, Gypsy. What do you guys think about this? I'm going to go ahead and cut that because the rest of it's just the trial. But yeah, 100%. Gypsy Rose.